When someone hurts you, your first instinct is to react with the same energy they threw at you. Maybe they raised their voice, so you want to raise yours even louder. Maybe they insulted you, and your mind immediately races to fire one back that cuts deeper. That's natural. It's the human reflex to protect ourselves from being attacked. But here's the problem. When we let anger take the wheel, we lose clarity. And when we lose clarity, we give away control. The moment you let anger speak for you, you hand the other person power over your emotions, your words, and even your reputation. Responding with clarity means stepping back long enough to breathe before you speak. It's not about suppressing your emotions. It's about directing them. Think about it like this. Clarity is a shield, while anger is a weapon. When you shield yourself, you keep your dignity intact. When you lash out with a weapon, you might hit back, but you also risk wounding yourself in the process. People remember your reaction more than they remember the hurtful thing said to you. And if your reaction is fueled by anger, you'll often look back and regret it more than the original insult. Clarity keeps you anchored when someone tries to drag you into their storm. Imagine someone saying something cruel in front of others. If you respond with anger, they've succeeded in pulling you down to their level. But if you respond with calm clarity, something like, "I don't accept being spoken to that way," you instantly shift the power dynamic. Suddenly, the focus is not on your outburst, but on their behavior. You've drawn a line without losing your composure. That's what preserving dignity looks like in real time. You're not pretending the hurt didn't happen. You're addressing it in a way that elevates you instead of shrinking you. The reason clarity is powerful is because it's intentional. Anger reacts, but clarity chooses. When you respond clearly, you've taken a second to separate what you feel from what you say. You can acknowledge that you're hurt without letting the hurt dictate your words. For example, instead of snapping, "You always disrespect me," a clear response would be, "That was disrespectful and I won't engage with that." Notice the difference. One fuels a fight, the other sets a boundary. One puts you on their level, the other puts you above it. That's why clarity is a form of self-respect. Think of a time when you reacted in anger and regretted it. Maybe it was a text you sent too quickly, or a conversation where you said things you didn't mean. Afterward, you probably felt worse, not better. That's because anger gives temporary satisfaction, but long-term damage. On the flip side, think about a time when you stayed calm, even when everything in you wanted to snap back. You walked away with your head high. You walked away without replaying the moment in shame. That's the difference clarity makes. It doesn't erase the pain, but it prevents you from adding regret on top of it. Another reason clarity preserves your dignity is because it leaves no room for misunderstanding. Anger often distorts the message. You may mean to defend yourself, but anger makes it sound like an attack. Clarity, however, speaks plainly. It says exactly what needs to be said without extra noise. That's not okay. I won't continue this conversation if it stays disrespectful. I hear you, but I disagree. These are clear responses. They don't leave people confused about where you stand. And when people are clear about your boundaries, they're less likely to test them again. At the end of the day, clarity is strength under pressure. It doesn't mean you're emotionless. It means you're wise enough not to let emotions run the show. Responding with clarity instead of reacting with anger keeps the attention on the real issue, not on your reaction. It shows maturity, composure, and self-control. And it reminds everyone watching, including yourself, that your dignity is worth more than a heated reaction in the moment. When someone hurts you, it's easy to feel like your only choices are to either stay silent or explode, but there's a middle ground that's both powerful and calm. That middle ground is setting a boundary. A boundary is not about controlling the other person, it's about protecting yourself. It's a clear statement of what you will and will not accept. And when you set a boundary, you're sending the message that you respect yourself too much to stay in a situation that tears you down. Boundaries aren't about pushing people away, they're about keeping your peace in place. The mistake most people make is thinking that boundaries have to be aggressive. They don't. A firm boundary is calm, short, and to the point. It doesn't require yelling, insulting, or justifying. For example, instead of saying, "Why do you always talk to me like this?" which invites an argument, a boundary sounds like, "I won't keep talking if the disrespect continues." Notice the difference. One pulls you into conflict, the other calmly ends the opportunity for it. You're not asking for permission, you're stating a standard, and people may not like it, but they'll understand it. Boundaries are about teaching people how to treat you. When you stay quiet in the face of hurt, you're unintentionally telling the other person that it's okay to keep doing it. On the other hand, when you snap back in anger, you give them the excuse to say you're overreacting. But when you set a firm boundary, you leave no room for confusion. You show that your respect is non-negotiable, and you do it without adding fuel to the fire. This not only communicates your worth to the other person, but also reminds you of your own strength and self-value. Think of it like this. Boundaries are not walls, they're doors. A wall shuts everyone out, but a door can open or close depending on how someone approaches you. If someone speaks with respect, the door is open. If they choose to hurt, the door closes. You're in control of the handle. This perspective keeps you from feeling guilty about setting boundaries because it's not about punishment, it's about conditions. Healthy relationships are built when both sides know where the door is and what it takes to walk through it without causing harm. A powerful part of setting boundaries is the follow-through. A boundary without action is just a wish. If you say, "I won't stay in this conversation if it gets insulting," but you stay anyway, the message is lost. But if you calmly walk away the moment the line is crossed, you reinforce your standard without saying another word. Action speaks louder than explanation. You don't need a long speech. You don't need to defend your choice. The act of stepping away communicates more respect for yourself than any angry response ever could. Boundaries also prevent you from carrying the weight of someone else's behavior. Without them, you might find yourself replaying conversations, wondering what you should have said, feeling drained and resentful. Boundaries free you from that cycle. They draw a clear line that says, "This part is yours, not mine." That separation protects your energy. It allows you to respond from a place of strength instead of being dragged into chaos. And when people see that you have those lines, even if they test them at first, they eventually learn to adjust or remove themselves from your space. The truth is, setting firm boundaries isn't about being harsh. It's about being clear. It's about respecting yourself enough to say, "This is how I expect to be treated," and then living in alignment with that standard. You can set them without shouting. You can set them without being cold. You can set them with calmness, confidence, and clarity. And when you do, you protect your dignity, preserve your peace, and prove to yourself that your self-respect is stronger than any attempt to tear you down. When someone throws hurtful words at you, the first temptation is to respond with a long explanation or a heated comeback. But the more words you use, the more fuel you're giving to the fire. People who hurt you often want a reaction. They want to see you unravel. They want you to get caught in defending yourself. That's why long explanations rarely work, because they hand the other person more chances to twist your words against you. But when you keep your responses short, calm, and controlled, you take away the satisfaction they're looking for, and you hold on to your power. A short response is powerful because it communicates boundaries without creating more conflict. For example, when someone insults you, instead of saying, "Why would you say that? Do you even realize how disrespectful that is? Don't you know that hurts me?" You simply respond with, "That's not okay." 5 words. No yelling, no long lecture, just clarity. That short phrase says everything it needs to. It tells the person they crossed a line, it signals your self-respect, and it ends the need for back and forth arguments that go nowhere. Calmness in your delivery is what makes those short responses land with even more weight. Imagine 2 scenarios. In one, you angrily shout, "That's not okay." In another, you calmly, firmly say, "That's not okay." The words are the same, but the effect is completely different. The first one shows they got to you, the second one shows they didn't. And that's where the strength comes in. Staying calm doesn't mean you're not hurt. It means you're not giving the other person the satisfaction of controlling your emotions. Calm is the tone of power. When you choose short, calm responses, you also leave space for the silence to do its job. Silence after a calm boundary creates discomfort for the other person, not for you. They're the ones left sitting in the weight of what they said. You're not rushing to fill the air. You're not trying to fix their behavior in that moment. You're letting your short words stand strong. And the truth is, silence plus brevity forces people to hear you in a way long explanations never do. Less is more because less cannot be argued with as easily. Another benefit of short, calm responses is that they reduce misunderstandings. The longer you speak when you're hurt, the easier it is to say something you didn't mean or something they can twist. But when you use only a few words, you cut out the risk of being misinterpreted. I don't accept that. That's disrespectful. Noted. These are short, simple, and impossible to distort. They put the weight of accountability on the other person without giving them a thread to pull on and unravel into more conflict. Think about the times you've tried to defend yourself to someone who was determined not to understand you. The more you talked, the less they listened. The more you explained, the more they dismissed. It's exhausting. But now think about the times you simply gave a short, calm reply and stopped there. The conversation either ended quickly or the other person had no choice but to sit with their own behavior. That's the quiet strength of brevity. It's not about winning an argument. It's about refusing to play a game that was designed for you to lose. Short, calm responses also protect your peace long after the conversation is over. You don't walk away replaying all the words you said, wondering if you went too far, regretting the extra fuel you gave to the conflict. Instead, you leave knowing you kept it simple, you kept it respectful, and you kept your power. The fewer words you use, the less you have to second guess. And that's the freedom you give yourself when you choose to respond with calm brevity instead of getting tangled up in the noise of hurtful words. When someone hurts you, one of the first traps they'll set is to make the conversation about them instead of about the harm they caused. They may try to shift blame, minimize what they said, or twist the situation so you're suddenly the one defending yourself. This is manipulation in disguise because it pulls your attention away from what you need and places it on their excuses. But here's the truth: you are not responsible for managing their comfort. Redirecting the focus back to your needs is the way you stop that cycle from ever taking root. When you redirect, you're not debating the details of what they did. You're centering the conversation on what you require moving forward. For example, instead of getting stuck in arguments like, "You shouldn't have said that, it was mean," which opens the door to denial, you say, "I need this conversation to stay respectful," or "I'm stepping away." Notice the difference. The first invites excuses and gaslighting. The second makes no space for it. You're not asking whether they agree with you. You're clearly stating what you will do to protect yourself. This shift is powerful because it takes away the manipulator's favorite weapon, control. People who hurt with words often want to bait you into endless back and forth debates where nothing changes. But when you redirect back to your needs, you stop playing defense and start playing offense. You're no longer answering their excuses. You're laying out your boundaries. That flips the entire dynamic. They can argue all they want, but you're not engaging in their game. You're standing firm in what you require, and that's where real strength shows. Redirecting also prevents emotional exhaustion. If you've ever been in a conversation where someone hurts you, then makes it about your reaction, you know how draining it feels. You leave the conversation questioning yourself instead of addressing the original harm. That's exactly how manipulation works. It confuses and exhausts until you give in. But by keeping the focus on your needs, you cut off that exhaustion at the root. You conserve your energy, you simplify the message, and you remind yourself that you're allowed to prioritize your peace over their approval. The beauty of redirecting is that it doesn't require long speeches. You don't need to explain every detail of why you feel hurt. You don't need to convince them to see your perspective. All you have to do is repeat your need calmly and consistently. I need this conversation to be calm. I need space right now. I need respect in order to keep engaging. These phrases are short, clear, and unshakable. They don't leave room for manipulation because they're not about convincing the other person, they're about declaring your standard. This approach also builds self-trust. Every time you redirect instead of getting lost in their excuses, you prove to yourself that you can handle difficult conversations without losing yourself in them. You teach yourself that your needs matter enough to take up space in the conversation. And once you start practicing this, you'll notice how much lighter you feel afterward. You won't replay the conversation in your head wondering if you explained enough, because you weren't there to persuade them. You were there to protect what you need, and that clarity keeps you steady. At the heart of this, redirecting the focus back to your needs is not about shutting people out. It's about refusing to be pulled into a cycle that was never going to serve you. It's about breaking patterns of blame, deflection, and guilt tripping by keeping the spotlight on what matters most: your peace, your dignity, and your standards. And when you consistently bring the conversation back to that, you remove the power of manipulation and put the power of choice back in your own hands. Silence is one of the most underrated responses when someone hurts you, because most people think silence means weakness or avoidance. But that's not true when silence is intentional. Silence is not shutting down, it's not running away, it's not pretending the hurt didn't happen. Intentional silence is a choice. It's the decision not to hand over your energy, your words, or your control to someone who is trying to provoke you. In the right moment, silence can say more than any speech ever could because it shows you are untouchable. The reason silence is powerful is because it denies the other person the reaction they are looking for. Hurtful people often thrive on seeing you upset, flustered, or defensive. That reaction gives them proof they struck a nerve, and that's the fuel they wanted all along. But when you remain silent, calm, and unshaken, they're left holding their own words. They don't get the payoff they were after. That emptiness becomes uncomfortable for them, not for you. Silence flips the script because it makes their behavior echo back on them without you lifting a finger. Silence also creates space. Space for you to think clearly, space for them to hear the weight of their words without interruption, and space for the tension to work in your favor. Imagine someone insults you, and instead of arguing back, you just look at them and say nothing. That moment of silence stretches longer and longer, and suddenly the insult doesn't sound powerful anymore. It sounds petty. Silence has a way of shrinking the other person's words while enlarging your presence, and that's why it carries so much strength. Another part of intentional silence is that it keeps you from saying something you'll regret. When emotions are high, words can come out sharper than you intended, and once they're spoken, you can't take them back. But silence gives you a pause button. It allows you to process your feelings before you decide if a response is even worth giving. Sometimes you'll realize the situation doesn't deserve any more of your energy. Other times, you'll find the right words to use later. Either way, silence keeps you in control of the timing and the tone. Silence doesn't mean you're weak or passive. In fact, it's often harder to stay silent than to lash out. It requires discipline, self-awareness, and confidence to let silence do the work. Weakness reacts immediately, strength pauses and chooses, and the people watching, because there are always people watching, will notice that. They'll see that you didn't let the moment break you down. They'll see that you valued your dignity over the urge to fire back. And that unspoken message will speak louder than anything you could have said out loud. Intentional silence also protects your peace after the moment is over. When you walk away from a conversation where you chose silence, you don't carry the weight of replaying angry words you wish you hadn't said. You don't feel the shame of knowing you lost control. Instead, you walk away lighter, knowing you didn't give someone else power over your emotions. That's the gift silence gives. It not only protects you in the moment, it protects you long after the moment has passed. It keeps your dignity intact without adding regret on top of the hurt. At its core, intentional silence is about choosing not to fight battles that don't deserve your energy. It's about recognizing that not every hurtful word requires an answer, and not every attack deserves your attention. Silence communicates strength because it shows that you are in control of yourself, even when someone else is out of control. It is proof that you don't have to match someone's noise with more noise.